Not only is Castlevania Symphony of the Night a masterpiece of video game design, it's teeming with references to history, religion, literature, and folklore. This is the Annotated Symphony of the Night. If you're a longtime player of the franchise, the long library might look familiar to you. A library level first appeared in Super Castlevania IV for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991, and its influence here in Symphony of the Night is apparent with some of its aesthetic choices and recurring enemies. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Historically, it was certainly common to have a library in a castle like this. In fact, many aristocrats of the period had libraries in their homes as the Renaissance moved forward. But close to the end of the 18th century where this game takes place, the concept of public lending libraries was beginning to make traction in Europe. Before then, many parochial and monastic libraries operated by religious orders would actually chain books to the shelves and tables, which, as we move through it, obviously doesn't happen here. So moving inside, we find recurring series enemy Dullahan, renamed Duran here in the North American version of the game, probably due to mistranslation. He first appears in Castlevania III, Dracula's Curse for the NES, and had also appeared in Super Castlevania IV as a common sword-wielding foe. He was promoted to boss status in Rondo of Blood for the PC Engine, but returns to grunt level here. He drops the hide, cuirass, and rapier, which the Armor Lord also dropped, but it's more logically farmed from this enemy if one is so inclined. A rapier is a thin sword used mostly for stabbing and quicker movements than something like a broadsword would provide. It was often used in civilian combat between the 15 and 1700s. Dullahan comes from Irish folklore as a horseman holding his own decapitated head that will take a life when its ride has concluded. Sometimes it's depicted using a carriage and wielding the spine of a dead man as a whip instead of a mounted horse and a sword. The headless rider myth and story has proliferated throughout the world from Germany to India, though perhaps the most famous iteration of it for American audiences was Washington Irving's famous short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Here's a funny room. Laid out on the floor for us to collect is a bronze cuirass, which is the next step up from the hide cuirass if that's what's still equipped. What's funny though is its placement underneath the tall, thin opening in the ceiling. For the sake of length, I won't revisit this room in a future video, so it's worth mentioning the use of this small chimney now. Above us is the Master Librarian, whom we'll meet in just a little bit, but it seems that he's a shopkeeper with loose pockets, as this bronze cuirass implies. By using the gravity boots in quick succession, Alucard can steal items from him as the game goes on, including a life vessel to add hit points, a ring of arcana, the Axe Lord armor, and the only place in the game where a player can find the Dracula's tunic armor. This enemy, the Ectoplasm, also originates from Super Castlevania IV. They're interesting for a few reasons. First, they're the first enemy in the game that we've encountered that can cause Alucard curse, which prevents him from attacking for a brief period. Luckily, they drop the uncursed consumable to counteract it. They also drop mana prisms, which will refill a magic meter. The other fun fact is that this enemy is strong against bladed weapons like what Alucard would logically have equipped at this early stage of the game, but not blunt ones like a mace or even his fists. If a player was experimenting with their weapons and attacks at this point, they'll find that monsters like the Ectoplasm imply that enemies have different affinities and defenses, which we'll also touch upon a little further down the road. The term ectoplasm comes from Nobel Prize-winning French physiologist Charles Richet. It's often described as the physical manifestation of the metaphysical, like the tactile feeling of a ghost, and was said to appear through mediums during seances in the 1800s. These instances were proven to be hoaxes though, long before Egon could get a sample for study. Up here are the flying spellbooks, which again first showed up in the series in Super Castlevania 4. They're the counterpart to the ectoplasm in that they're weak to bladed weapons and strong versus blunt ones. They're a book of beginning spells according to the librarian's bestiary, so they drop a pentagram. They also rarely drop a $1,000 money bag. This is significant because in the Double Fine Devs Play video, series producer and Symphony co-director Koji Igarashi mentions that this comes from a practice by Japanese people to hide cash in the pages of books. In that video, he also mentions a certain place that will make the money bag drop with more regularity if you kill 2 spell books simultaneously, but I could never get it to work. The Thornweed here can only be hit by dropping something on it or attacking downward, which normally isn't a problem, but makes certain weapons like the Bossiard useless against it. It drops strawberries and grapes. It is, of course, originally from Super Castlevania 4, and is the youngest in a family of enemies that we'll continue to see as the game goes forward. In the Japanese version of the game and all other entries in the franchise, it's known as the Uni. The Fairy Scroll relic's only use is to produce the names of enemies that are being fought in the lower part of the screen. But it makes thematic sense that it's found in a location like this, I suppose. It's being defended by 3 magic tomes known as Weapons Dictionary in Japan. Like their counterpart, the Spellbook, these enemies drop $2,000 money bags, as well as a saber.
It's been a long time, old one.
Oh, it's you, Master Alucard. What do you need?
I need your help.
Young Master, I cannot aid one who opposes the Master.
You won't go unrewarded.
Really? In that case, just tell me what you need.
Let's meet the Master Librarian finally, whom bears something of a resemblance to Italian polymath Leonardo da Vinci. As you can see, the primary purpose of this character is to purchase items, but he also offers a few other services.
I'm interested in this.
First, we can sell any gems that we find throughout the game to him.
Thank you.
You can purchase videos detailing ways to conquer the bosses, though there are several ways to overcome enemies in this game, so don't take them as gospel. Next, you can view a bestiary of enemies, but note that you have to attack them at least once to make the list. With a clear game on file, you can also listen to a sound test which includes a song called Silence that's only found here and nowhere else in the game. You may notice that the menus may animate differently every time they open up. He mentions in the Devs Play video that he couldn't decide on which animation he liked best, so like the save game icons from the first video, he just kept them all in the finished product. As far as items available for purchase, the list of goods grows as the game progresses, expanding the most once you hit the second major phase. Keep in mind that many of the items I'm going to mention are listed once you hit that second phase. The Jewel of Open is the only item that's absolutely necessary to buy, which is why the price is so low. It's a relic that will open the few blue-tinged doors in the castle, and is known as the Unlock Jewel in the Japanese version. As far as actual stuff on the shelves, most of the items listed below can be obtained as rare drops from enemies, but a few items are Librarian Store exclusives. Starting with weapons, the only 2 that are obtained here are the Thunderbrand and Harper. The Thunderbrand is a sword with thunder elemental properties, as the name implies, but aside from its boost in attack, it doesn't have a lot of practical application, as only 2 monsters in the whole game are weak to thunder, the Skyla and Hippogriff bosses. This makes the thunder affinity basically useless, as these monsters are in the first phase of the game, while this weapon can't be bought until the second. It has a thunderburst attack using a fireball motion, at the cost of some of the magic meter. Its name in the Japanese version, as well as its in-game description here, is the Thunder Sword of Indra. Indra is a deity of rain, lightning, and thunderstorms in Hinduism. In later Hinduism, he's seen as something of a god of war. The Sword Harper is the most powerful sword from a raw stat perspective found in the first phase of the game, but it doesn't have a special attack, so it's just straight muscle. Harmony of Despair, a multiplayer Castlevania game released for the Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network, clarifies the description of this weapon to state that it's the legendary sword that beheaded Medusa from Greek mythology, which would make it a harpy, which is a sword with a sort of sickle-like arc at the end. In the myth, Perseus was given one by his father Zeus to slay the Gorgon. As far as headgear is concerned, you can buy a velvet hat that looks like a stocking cap, or a leather hat that looks more like a ball cap. Also a silver crown, which gives the highest intelligence boost of any headpiece in the game. For body armor, we can buy the steel cuirass, which is just slightly stronger than the iron cuirass, and the diamond plate, which is one of the strongest armors in the game from a straight defense stat perspective. All of the cloaks that the librarians sell are unique. The first, the reverse cloak, gives a small boost to constitution, and the color of which can be reversed, hence the name, through the system's menu in the subscreen. Next, the elven cloak, or elf's robe in the Japanese version, is so named for its green color. Finally, there's Joseph's cloak, or made to order in the Japanese version. With the system's menu, you can change the colors of it as you see fit. Its name in the North American version is a biblical reference to Joseph, the youngest son of Jacob, whom was bestowed a coat of many colors, which drew much jealousy from his older brothers. As for accessories, Alucard can buy the Ring of Pails, known as the Pearl Ring in Japan. This is the first of several rings in the game that boost all of Alucard's stats, this one by +1. Next, we can buy the Duplicator accessory, which is the most expensive item in the game by far. It's only available after a cleared game appears on the memory card, as it clearly breaks the game by itself. Equipping it along with any consumable lets you use that item infinitely, making it a favorite of speedrunners using a Buffalo Star throwing weapon. It dramatically drops Alucard's stats when equipped, but the potential devastation it causes is a pretty small price to pay. We won't be using it for this run of the game, but I'll bring it up again in a future video. The librarian also sells a variety of spell scrolls that list the controller input for respective magic attacks. I'll talk about magic in a later video, so these aren't worth getting into now. Lastly, the librarian will sell you an incomplete castle map, which is cute, but totally worthless for our purposes. With that, there really isn't a lot to say at this point about the long library. While some luck run finagling can push Alucard farther above his normal jump height for a teensy bit of sequence breaking, the rest of this area can't be explored yet without the use of other relics we'll grab in later videos. Let's make our way outside the library and on to our next destination then. The placement of this, the first warp room, should be a hint to players that your next stop should be close to where this warp room takes you, which is right back to the castle entrance. Again, bone scimitars have been replaced with bloody zombies at this point. We'll see more differences down the road. As we make our way back through the marble gallery, we can clearly see that we're meant to backtrack through previously conquered areas, which is something of a tenet in this genre, which has come to be known in the common video game parlance as Metroidvania. The term was first coined by freelance games writer Scott Sharkey sometime in the late 90s after Symphony's release. Though it's a very direct portmanteau, it's certainly not incorrect. This particular Castlevania seemed obviously influenced by non-linear side-scrolling action games of the period, like Nintendo's Metroid franchise, specifically Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. According to Igarashi's 2014 GDC presentation on the genre, which he used to co-opt the name into Igavania, the main influence of the exploration-based gameplay was from a different famous Nintendo franchise, The Legend of Zelda, though he did mention that he and his team were fans of the Metroid games as well. In both the GDC talk and the strategy guide interview nearly 20 years earlier, just recently translated by Schmuckulations, Igarashi pointed out that this genre shift from linear level-based gameplay to non-linear exploration-heavy design was meant to give the player more bang for their buck. I'm paraphrasing here, but he mentions that if someone were to pay $60 for a video game, they should get their money's worth.
So, we meet again, Alucard.
It seems so.
As friendly as ever, I see. It's strange. This castle is different than I remember it.
This castle is a creature of chaos. It may take many incarnations.
So I can't trust my memories, huh? Oh well, I'll do my best. Good luck.
Another encounter with Maria tells us that we're right on track for the critical path of the game, and here we have our next stop, the Royal Chapel. We'll explore this in the next episode. See you then.